The last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of what I see here is Mioland's offering to us of potentially the ways to think about the causes of the disaster. So I want to point out these little silver pigs here. And we talk about them as the kochon Creole, the Creole pigs. And it's significant, sort of thrown in there, and you might just think, there's a dog also, that it's just, because obviously animals are part of the story too in ways that we don't think about, right? That they were also casualties of the earthquake. That could be one way of thinking about it, but the kochon Creole in particular is important because it is a reminder of a lost past, but also a connection of that past to this present situation. So I'll say more about that. In the 1970s, when Jean-Claude Duvalier, so the son of François is the guy who used to dress like Baron, right? So he has a son, and the son, he essentially changes the constitution to make the son eligible to take over power as he's about to die, right? So he wants to continue his legacy through his son. And the son comes to power at like 19 years old, or they lied and said he was 21, whatever, right? And he essentially tries to continue the vision of his father. So the father says in 1969, right, I want Haiti to become the Taiwan of the Caribbean. They have ideas about development for Haiti. And these ideas are also coming straight out of, right, if you will, the advice of the United States, right, through the Council of the United States. And we know that 1969, 1971, we're talking about the Cold War moment where the US is very much invested in supporting, whether you're a democratic country or an authoritarian, I don't really care, but if you are with me in this war against communism, I will give you endless resources, right? So the Duvalier family very much is open to a relationship with the United States, including also applying whatever economic policies that they're proposing. So the kochon Creole essentially were targeted by the state of Haiti through Jean-Claude because there was this claim that there was a swine flu and that they were going to cause people to be sick, so that they needed to be completely eliminated. And instead, a more genetically modified pig, the pink pig, would be introduced to Haiti because this is a pig that could produce more babies, more quickly. And this idea, and of course it's dumping of these industrially produced animals from the United States into Haiti. This helps to understand really how neoliberalism functions in Haiti, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that is. And so just being able to point to the kochon Creole who were essentially exterminated, though there are rumors that some people hid their pigs and still have them. And I've seen a couple as a kid in the rural areas. But the idea was to replace the Haitian pig with this pink US-produced pig. And actually the swine flu also was said to be happening in Cuba, except the Cubans resisted this. We're talking about a Cuba that's already controlled by Castro, so they were just like, we're not doing that, right? We're going to heal these pigs and keep them instead of taking on your, industrially produced pig, right? So essentially, Jean-Claude Duvalier, even though his father had this vision, is the one who implements the vision. And 1970s is a crucial moment in the history of the world, really, where you have the United States in this battle with the Soviet Union and wanting to impose capitalism at a global scale, or to preserve it at a global scale, is going to make a certain number of prescriptions to countries that were emerging out of colonialism, right? In the case of Haiti, it's not exactly the same timeline as other countries like Jamaica, who at that moment, during the Jean-Claude Duvalier the François Duvalier were just coming out of colonialism, right? But it's still going to be a economic policy that is forced upon all of the countries of the third world / global south. So Haiti is not outside of that conversation. And essentially neoliberalism, how it's functioned in Haiti, because neoliberalism, of course, depending on where you stand, looks a little bit different. So in Haiti, it became that if Haiti is to develop, then it needs to industrialize, which is why we had this piece about François Duvalier saying we want to make Haiti the Taiwan of the Caribbean. He was specifically talking about industrial parks, right? So then the US says the model of development is, and the way that capitalism has moved is that you need to go away from agricultural capitalism, away from mercantilist capitalism, into this industrial capitalist phase. That means that you are on the way of development. Of course, it doesn't take into account that industrial capitalism relies on one place having industry, but yet another being able to provide the raw materials that you need to be able to transform in your little factories into the final goods that you're selling on the market, right? So this is a conundrum for supposedly spaces that are third world trying to emerge. So what the logic was is that you focus on developing. Development necessarily means industrial capitalism. And since you're supposed to move away from agricultural production, because that's backwards, primitive, that's not going to help you launch, we're going to provide for you what you lack, right? So that includes also food stuff. And essentially, this is the relationship that the United States wants to develop with Haiti. And we see great resistance by the Haitian people to this model of development, right? So they push back against the dictatorship. They're able to usher in the revolution of 1986, as they call it. And there's this moment where Haiti is, or Haitian people finally have the opportunity to decide, well, what do we want, right? How do we want to move forward? And they make this decision when they go and they elect Jean-Bertrand Ayiti into power. The idea was that he was going to bring forth a people-centered, right, model of development. He's quickly deposed. 9 months later, he spends some time in the United States essentially lobbying for his return, and one of the things that they asked him to do, well, you want to return to power, then you will agree to certain terms. And some of these terms included, again, right, to essentially crush national production. So don't worry about producing foods, right? We will send you food stuff, and I keep calling it food stuff because it's not really good food, right? We will send you some of this. You have to buy it, though. The neoliberal scheme is essentially that in order for you to develop, that you need to do certain key projects. And in Haiti specifically, the idea was, right, industry, in particular, the production of textile products, which connects back to Miolande. Miolande herself, her mother had been a factory worker at the very beginning of the first industrial park, I think, is built in 1974, or is completed in 1974. And in the process, the government essentially recruited people from outside of the city, because Port-au-Prince was built to hold 250,000 people. Today it's said to have 3 million. Right? So the government essentially, in order to vacate those lands, because there were other plans for these rural lands, right, these agricultural lands, again, not to grow food, but to put other structures. And if it was growing food, it would be really monocrop style plantations, right, rather than multiple different crops towards feeding the population, right? So the logic was of neoliberalism and the plan for places like Haiti is import-export, right? That this is what you need to be focused on, that your country becomes a site of extraction of raw materials, or also certain processed goods like the textile, like the clothing. And I talked earlier about clothing being made for all kinds of different companies. Today, the ones we might recognize, like Gap and Walmart and Zara, etc. And so the idea is that then your land where you would produce your food is not supposed to be used to produce food, but really to put all these development projects on. So there was a deliberate move to both violently remove people from the rural lands and also entice them to say that there are going to be jobs, right? So if you come to the city, you will find jobs. And they did make attempts to provide some housing. So if you've ever heard of Cité Soleil, which was originally called Cité Simone, which is the name of the wife of François Duvalier, this was created to welcome people coming from the rural areas who are going to work for the factories. Of course, many more people came than maybe they anticipated. At the same time, right, what I wanted to point out about the housing structure did not attempt to reproduce the Laku style of living, where it's really big family compounds, right? You have multi-generations living there, but also it's not something that is deeply bound by biology, right? So the Laku is really a different way of thinking family outside of the heteronormative idea of family. But even in inviting people and removing them from the land and then creating these neighborhoods, these public housing structures, in it was embedded a logic of heteronormative family structures. It didn't allow for the same multi-generational folks to live. Did people do that? They did it. They brought more people in who were supposed to, who were not accounted for in this model of housing. So, again, people will do what they do regardless of what the state has decided that they should do. U.S. protects corn, right? U.S. protects rice production, but it tells you you cannot do that, that in your country, protectionism starts smelling like communism. And so you cannot do that. You need to liberalize your market, essentially means open it up to competition coming from elsewhere and not protect your own industries, right? Industries including also agricultural production. And so that's part of the neoliberal plan for Haiti. And of course, like I said before about the food stuff, the things that Haiti does not produce and needed to be able to use in order to, for example, build housing, they were cheap things. They were the cheapest materials being produced elsewhere, being offered to Haitians to buy, right? So connecting back to the story about the earthquake, right, that this neoliberal plan that starts to be imagined out and imposed in the 70s and really starts to take hold in the 90s, despite people's continual resistance to it. And I think the story of Haiti and why we see the things the way we do is that Haitians are perpetually resisting and trying to slow down the machine, right? But in the case of the earthquake specifically, the issue had been, there's twofold, right? That the fact that the state was asked to take a back seat and to remove itself. It was already not very motivated to do that. It was very easy for the state to say hands off, right, in terms of organizing life, in terms of providing infrastructure and housing. And the neoliberal model really is that the state is supposed to retreat from social affairs, right, and really allow the market to determine people's lives. And the market certainly determined people's lives, right, bringing in cheap materials. So most of the Haitian housing, it's done cement that's essentially being mined from rivers, from mountains, but the actual iron that is inside the structure of the house is imported. And some of these materials themselves, right, were cheaply made coming from elsewhere. So you had the sort of actual materials that compose the housing that was cheap, right, and that is the result of this neoliberal plan imposed on Haiti. But also you have the state just not making sure that houses are built up to code, right? That not too many houses are built in a certain area, or doing studies about, where is the seismic line and where people should not build. So for example, because Port-au-Prince became this place of seduction, right? This promise of jobs, when they came, some housing was built, but a lot of housing was not. So people were building in riverbeds on the side of mountains, right? So you have the absence of the state in organizing the space, and then produces, right, is sort of the underlying reason for the magnitude of the catastrophe. And so for me, when I see the kochon Creole it's Miolen's attempt to say, I can't say it all here, right? And she typically says, right, I don't want to get into politics, but she drops hints, right? The kochon Creole is a reminder that this 2010 moment actually begins, it was set up in this moment in the 1960s, 1970s Haiti. And here, the part about where Bill Clinton, who has been dubbed the King of Haiti, and we could spend a whole lot of time talking about why Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have been very instrumental in where Haiti is today, but that's for another lesson. But essentially, he has a speech, and I remember I was in Haiti listening to the radio, and I hear him on the radio, and then there's someone translating, and he essentially apologized. He says, this disaster is the result of the economic policies that his government in particular, when he's president, pushed onto Haiti. Of course, the translator doesn't translate that piece, and I remember thinking when I'm listening, I was like, that's the piece you need to translate. That's the one everybody needs to make sure they heard, that a former president of the United States was taking on the personal blame for what had happened in Haiti in 2010. Of course, he went on to make himself essentially the governor of Haiti, because what happens in the earthquake is there's a suspension of the state and its different institutions. So parliament is essentially dissolved, and this interim commission takes over supposedly to organize a reconstruction. And Bill Clinton names himself as the one who's coordinating reconstruction in Haiti. Eventually they realized that was not appropriate, so they made him a co-director, a co-president of this reconstruction process, and $12 billion were sent to Haiti. About $6 billion of them went into the pockets of the Clintons personally. And this is not just hearsay. There have been lots of documentaries and other scholarly work produced that show that this money was essentially embezzled by the Clintons, right? Half of the money. So think about what $12 billion could have done for Haiti. And so, I think that's, I'll end on that note about what produced this disaster. Is very much, right, this neo-colonial relationship that Haiti has with the United States, and the way that Haiti continues to be seen as a place to extract raw resources, labor certainly, and some, right, commodities, including the textile production. And this is why Mylène Constant's work as someone who abandoned the factories around the fact that she was getting paid pittance, right? And I said this yesterday in the presentation about how Mylène's work has to be understood also in the context of neoliberalism, but particularly the fight for the increase in minimum wages, which is still an ongoing fight in Haiti today. And specifically, this minimum wage fight is really centered around garment industry workers, because they are technically the highest paid workers, if you will, in Haiti. And so I hope that my observations have offered you some greater knowledge of what's happening in Haiti, and in particular the relationship between the US and Haiti, and why we would see, rather than showing mutual aid and a Combite style of response to the earthquake and disaster, rather than talking about the Haitian state as a neo-colonial state, people, or the US rather think of it as a failed state, as something as if, right, it's endemic, it's something that is within Haitians that we cannot somehow organize ourselves, right? Rather than thinking about the neo-colonial relationship between the US and Haiti, and how the disasters we see produced in this other place is actually coming out of the minds of people in Washington. But I think the most important part is how Haitians continue to take care of themselves. And despite everything that's been organized to produce their premature death, right? And I'll end there.